Thank you so much for joining us today in this segment of the 256 Dialogues. We appreciate that you're going to spend with us the next 2 hours. And because we're spending so much time talking, I request that I take off the mask for the next 2 hours because we are actually observing social distance here. Today, in this 6th edition of the 256 Dialogues, we're going to focus on a very important, interesting subject that relates, that every one of us can relate to, and that is the burden of unpaid care work in COVID times, and what is the role of men in this time, especially with regard to unpaid care work. As we know, COVID has revealed what Nancy Fraser has termed the care crisis. Many people have lost their jobs due to COVID. Over 400 million people have lost their jobs, so they're at home. Schools have shut down, so children are at home. Women, especially those in the informal sector, are mainly affected, and they're at home taking care of either children or other sick people. So there's a lot that is going on that COVID has really exposed. Even when it comes to work, we have seen that we no longer have to go to offices. Some people don't have to go to office. They have to stay at home and work from home. But you're working from a home that has children in there that you have to look after. You probably have a sick person that you have to look after. So there's a lot that COVID has really revealed in terms of unpaid care work. And that is the conversation we are going to have today. And I am very excited, and I hope that you are too excited. To have and delve into this conversation, I am joined by a very able and wonderful panel today. On my extreme left, we have Mr. Venancio Ahabwe. He's a teacher, an author, who has written so many articles in different newspapers and journals and magazines in East Africa. He's a very passionate writer, and currently he's a public health advocate working with Johns Hopkins University Center for Communications as a technical advisor here in Kampala. Very welcome, Mr. Ahabwe.
Thank you very much, and I'm happy to meet you, our viewers.
Yeah. Next to Mr. Ahabwe is Mase Munduru Grace. Mase is a human rights lawyer, a women's rights activist, currently working as a program manager at Action Aid Uganda. Mase has previously worked on women access to gender justice. She has worked on community mobilization and awareness to challenge patriarchy and advocacy for gender inclusiveness in policies within Uganda and the Great Lakes region. Mase is very passionate about gender issues, gender justice. Mase, we are very happy to have you here today.
I'm very honored to be here, Geraldine, and I would like to greet our viewers who are watching this dialogue live. I'm very excited to have this conversation alongside the very able team that is here of panelists. Thank you very much for having us.
Yeah. And next to me is not a new face to many of you. He's been on our TV stations. He's Mr. Banji Venancio. He has lectured at Chambogo University for over 10 years. He's a medical social care practitioner with Naguru Referral Hospital for over 6 years. He's a national trainer for government and NGOs since 2010 on social. We know and have seen him. He is a panel on the famous NTV main show that comments on social affairs since 2014. He has a background in social work. Very welcome, Mr. Banji.
Yes, thank you, Geraldine. Good morning, viewers. I'm glad to be here. I hope that this dialogue will contribute to our understanding of care work. Thank you.
Before I delve in, I would like to thank the organizers of this segment, the African Studies Bookstore here in Kampala in partnership with Friedrich Ebert Stiftung. Thank you so much for always investing in conversations like this. And that brings me to the topic of the day. I would like us to delve really into this topic as I've spelled out today. Unpaid care work is important, undoubtedly. It has to be done because it is the foundation of our societies, it is the foundation of functional institutions, and it is important as well for development. And like I said, it has been brought to light more now than ever before, because most of us have had to spend time at home in this time. First, at least I know every one of us has at least spent time at home in the lockdowns, and we got a feel of this unpaid kind of work. So that brings me to my next question to you, our dear panelists. Is the COVID-19 pandemic an opportunity or a challenge for us to rethink about how unpaid care work is a burden, especially on women in this country and actually globally? And if yes, how can we embrace the opportunity? Mr. Venecio Ahabwe, would you like to go first?
Yeah, thank you so much, Geraldine.
Yeah.
Again, I greet our viewers. Yes, it's an interesting perspective, their work, and the role of men in this. We know very well that in most families, women do almost all the care work that there is to do for children, even for the husbands, for the men, for the elderly relatives, and all the other family members. So it's usually a big challenge. Now, during the lockdown, men had an opportunity to be at home. In fact, there was that time when people were all advised to stay inside the house. Yes, in many countries, lockdowns actually were effective. In others, in the communities, some people violated the lockdowns, you know, the curfew times. But generally, it was possible the first time in many men's lives to stay at home from morning to evening, from Monday to Sunday, you know, for a long time. And therefore, to be very close to the aspect of care work within the home. The challenge that I see here is that in many cases, even the men had to be cared for, like children in their home. So it's in most cases, because they were not used to this kind of, you know, most men like to go out to attend gatherings. In fact, recent studies also, they are fewer in proportion, as a proportion of the population, but most public gatherings, apart from churches, of course, are dominated by men. So they like gatherings. So it was sort of a punishment for them to now stay at home and even do some care work within the house. So, so that was quite a challenge. Now, therefore, it increased the burden on the woman to look after the children and the other family members and the man, and moreover, now this time for a longer time, from morning to evening because he's there and he's demanding 1, 2, 3 all the time. Breakfast, lunch, water, you know, so many things that they have to be, they needed. So, but the other opportunity is that many men realized that they could not just be in one place doing nothing, and therefore in different households it was possible for them to participate in some of the tasks that require care within the home. But how far they could go is also a different matter, because there are some tasks, care work, which is unpaid, that the men would think this is not my work. At least in our African context, men feel they have a limit to how far they can go in what they can do within the house, within the home. So, so I think it was both a blessing, an opportunity for men to try their hands on a number of things, but also a challenge, because as possibly we might see in the next segment of this discussion, it also caused conflicts as a result of unclear, undefined limits, the boundaries beyond which the men could go. It also caused conflicts between men and women in the house, but also between men and the children. And of course, the conflicts between even the mothers and their children. So it was, yes, I think it's a balancing act, but mainly I think it was a blessing for the man to see, to touch, and to feel what it means to stay at home full time and participate in the activities of the home. Yeah.
Thank you. Mercy, would you perceive the pandemic as an opportunity to shine a light on this burden that women have carried for centuries? Yeah? Mr. Ahawe says, in the African context, men feel like they have limits on what unpaid work they can do. Do you agree with him? Do you think that this is an opportunity to shine a light on the so-called limits of what an African man can do in unpaid care work?
Thank you very much, Geraldine. I think just like has been alluded by Geraldine, we saw COVID from different angles and in different lights, depending on the side you're sitting at. And with regards to the topic that we're talking about of unpaid care work, this is something that has been with us for a longest time. And because our society is deeply rooted in patriarchy, it is something that is not worth talking about because it is perceived as normal. So we have literally normalized the issue of care work. So it is not something that would ordinarily be a topic of discussion anywhere. And that is why I'm very thrilled to be sitting on a panel that is talking about unpaid care work. I've been in women's rights work for a long time, and I can tell you it is not every day that you're invited to a panel to talk about unpaid care work. And that is because it's something that has been normalized. It's something that should not ordinarily, in the opinion of so many people, be talked about. And that is because already, with the way our societies are structured and with the way patriarchy works, the issue of gender roles in the homes is pretty much defined and clear-cut. What women are supposed to do and what men are supposed to do. It doesn't matter what situation we're in. So what COVID has done is to amplify what these roles come with, is to amplify the impact of the care burden. Because COVID in itself is a pandemic. And a pandemic means there are people who are sick, there are people who are dying, and the numbers keep soaring up. And I look at care work in two perspectives, Geraldine. I look at care work, first of all, on the perspective of caring for children, caring for families, caring for the elderly. But I also look at it in terms of chores and work, and especially work that is done at household level. So if you look at the both angles of unpaid care work, you will realize that COVID just came to amplify what has already been there. Perhaps it has just put more pressure on families to sort of realign what roles each person plays. But I also want to just mention that this extends to the workspace too. So when we're talking about unpaid care work, we should not just restrict ourselves to families. We also know that there are very many people, as Geraldine had mentioned at the beginning, who have lost their jobs, but there are people who are still working even during this period when the world is starting to open up. But the care work, the unpaid care work, goes with you wherever you're going. So it literally has an impact in terms of your productiveness, even when you're in a formal workspace. So it also now challenges institutions, both formal and informal, in terms of how are you appreciating the importance of unpaid care work in your policies, in your practices. So I'm very sure that in our discussions we shall delve deeper, but I really want to say that COVID has given us an opportunity to just speak about this, but also to challenge us in terms of unlearning some of the things that we've always normalized that relate to patriarchy, that relate to gender roles, and so we're starting to open up to these conversations, which I'm very happy about.
Banji, what's your last word on whether it's an opportunity or not?
I think it's context. It depends on the context. For those of us in the urban setting, and then we've been locked at home. I remember being locked at home, I think, for like almost 2 months, 3 months. It was an opportunity to appreciate the effort and the energies that are put in this unpaid work. In fact, where we need to draw the line from, and I think Marcia was really pointing in that direction, is that work, traditionally work, has been looked at as, economic work, where you paid, the monetized work. Now, the social production, which is where most of the unpaid work is placed, has really not been discussed. It has been taken as a given, I am privileged to be a man, and I'm using the word privileged, to be a man that even when you return home with your wife, the moment you open the door, you start asking, can I have this, can I have that, can I have this? And all that is work, unpaid, okay? So COVID has really, in my opinion, it has really exerted more pressure to the people who have been traditionally delivering unpaid work. It has put more pressure on them. And as my colleague Venancio here said, in fact, there is already evidence that in many families, domestic violence, especially GBV, gender-based violence, has increased because the man is taking himself as a king, despite the fact that the workload has increased on especially the woman. The man is still staying seated in his throne, demanding to be cared for. And so it has been both a blessing but also a curse in some instances where pain, untold pain, has been meted on especially women, as men demand for more services that are delivered through unpaid work.
Okay. Interesting that all of that the fact that people were forced, especially in urban areas, to stay at home highlighted or made them appreciate unpaid care work. But it's sad that it also, like you say, became a curse. And I think it's partly because of what Ahabwe says. People have made it normal to create boundaries between what women do and what men don't do. And like Mr. Ahabwe, you said, when people stayed at home, especially in urban areas, when the lockdown happened, there was that conflict. There were expectations of, no, you're supposed to do this, no, I am not supposed to do it. In fact, you said that some men felt punished to stay at home. And that's interesting, if you'd like to use the word, because that makes me delve into the conversation of, one, should there be boundaries in terms of roles between men and women, especially with regard to care work? Should there be? Should it be a reason for domestic violence? You know, this undefined, or these boundaries that we've created, should they be there? Should we have domestic violence because of those boundaries? Banji, what's your take?
I think we need to make a clear distinction between what I would call the social DNA of work and the natural DNA of work. I think, if I may borrow from the Bible, we are created equal before God. We have equal capacities before God. And therefore, we are capable, both men and women, we are capable of performing the same duties, which are not biological, the same duties. Now, when it comes to the social DNA of work, and this feeds into what Mas said here, the issue of patriarchy, but also the issue of social norms, that you have been raised up through generations with a distinction that this is what men do, this is what women do. Okay, this is what men do, this is what women do. And so even when you grow up, it becomes natural, in quotes, that you look on when certain tasks are being done. You look on. Probably because of that, you want to also develop the skill of doing those things, you know. There are some men, they leave them in the house even when the food is in the kitchen. They don't have the, you know, the ability to even go and warm the food, to put in the microwave and warm it, or to light a sigiri if they are at that level and then warm the food. They don't know how. So it takes us to that point where we say then, where are we supposed to move? Ideally, the COVID period is supposed to be a learning period for especially men. Okay, especially men, because it's normally the men, you know, because we have the power, we therefore tend to hold on onto that power and defend our roles. We say, no, we are not supposed to do that. But we are the beneficiaries. In fact, our viewers, the men especially, need to know that participation in most of this care work is beneficial, very, very beneficial, both biologically, health-wise, social-wise, you know. And sometimes people have wondered why, for instance, men probably die earlier than women. The women kill a lot of stress when they are doing some of these chores. That's why when you go to the kitchen, you'll hear them singing, or in stories, in conversations with fellow women. But for you, the man, you are there just seated in front of TV, adding more weight, becoming physically unfit. And then eventually, when you leave the world, they say men die earlier. There are a lot of benefits we can derive, both personal but also social. And, you know, we need to move society to a point where really we don't say this is for women and this is for men. We are all human beings. We need to partake equally in this kind of work.
Yes. Is there a need for these boundaries? He speaks of highlight why it is important that men should participate more, should have a role in unpaid care work.
Thank you very much. And I think I loved where he took the discussion, especially on the subject of patriarchy that I touched about early. Patriarchy being a system where, you know, for the benefit of our viewers who may not be familiar with some of these terms, is a system that is male-dominated. So it gives power to men as compared to women. And that power comes with what he has called privilege, meaning you're entitled to certain privileges because you're a man. For example, privileges such as being served, your breakfast being made for you, your clothes being washed for you, and I mean, you can just choose to sit, and you can also command both children, women, anybody in the household. That is the kind of privilege that patriarchy gives to the men. Now, what this does is that there is a piled burden on girls and women. I know we're talking about women, but we must not forget that girls literally inherit the same burdens that their mothers inherit, because the way these roles have been structured is that women and girls are on one side and boys and men are on the other. So that's why when we're growing up, your mother would rather send a girl to fetch water than a boy. Boys will do, you know, other chores that are less cumbersome and that take a shorter time compared to the girls. And I must mention that unpaid care work has a lot to do with time. How much time is spent doing those things, which robs you of so many things, including rest, including the ability to make money, and very many others. So most times when this burden rests, for example, on women, it starts to impact family relations very directly. One is the disconnect between couples, for example, because your wife knows that she has the duty to care for the family, including the man, and there's a common saying that, you know, your husband is your firstborn. So already that is internalized and normalized. So ordinarily your wife is going to spend more time perhaps trying to, you know, live up to that expectation. And in doing this, you literally do not have a bond or a conversation as adults, even about different things. So most times you're disconnected from your wife, you're disconnected from